There's a little voice that tells you when it's time to do things. And the mistake that I've made is ignoring that little voice. The thing is, that little voice will never shut up. That little voice, it will get louder and louder and louder until you have no option but to listen to it.
Mary Beth McCormick, thank you for joining me. This is our first episode of CRE 301. CRE 301 is commercial real estate, not 101, not 201, but 301, and we are trying to provide a platform for young real estate professionals in the commercial real estate industry, provide them tools to excel at their everyday work. So I figured you'd be the perfect person to start with. And I think one thing that we struggle as industry professionals is trying to navigate our career or try to map it out and also enjoy the parts that we love and work-life balance and all of these different topics. And I think you'd be the perfect interviewee for a person to speak about how to navigate through a career that you love in commercial real estate. To start, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Casey, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again. And I didn't realize this was your first. It's a real honor to be here for your first podcast.
Thank you. You were the inspiration.
That's so sweet. Thank you. Okay, so how to begin?
How to begin?
I ended up in real estate by accident,
Okay.
Which is what's happened with most things in my life. And now looking back, I'm 65. So looking back, I realized that, all of these things that I thought were generally happy accidents were all kind of part of the plan.
Okay.
I mean, everything that I've learned, and I've had a ton of different jobs in my life, and everything that I've done has kind of helped me prepare for the next level. And so everything that I did in real estate or before helped me with the teaching. Before I was in real estate, I started as a math major.
Okay. A math major. What made you want to study math?
The SAT said I should. I think I did really well on the math side, and I did pretty well on the verbal. But my advisor in high school said, "Well, you need to go into math." And my brother was a math major, and so I just kind of followed that. And I will say that the math club had the best parties I've ever been to. So that was fun my freshman year of college, living away from home and, going to parties with professors and older, undergrads and grad students and talking about infinity and the concept of infinity. And that was really cool.
Derivatives.
Well, that wasn't so cool, but it's part of the game. But after a while, I felt like I needed something different, and at the time, I thought it was an existential crisis. Looking back, I think I just was only feeding one part of myself, one part of my brain, the numbers side, and I love numbers, and I love solving number-related puzzles. I love mysteries and puzzles and that kind of thing, so that fit really well.
Okay.
But I also love interacting with people. I'm an introvert who loves people. So I was getting the introvert side fed, but not the people side fed. And so I did a 180 and I came back here. I went to Ohio State and I changed my major to social work, which seems nuts in retrospect, and it seemed kind of nuts at the time, but I knew I'd be around people more. Did that for a couple years, figured out that wasn't for me. That probably was when I took a big knife away from a woman who weighed twice what I weighed, and I thought, well, maybe there's another way to earn a living.
I was just about to ask what made you realize it wasn't for you, but...
Yeah, it was too dangerous
Yeah.
for me. Well, the part that I was in was just too dangerous, and I couldn't solve anything with numbers. You can solve things and you know what the answer is.
Right.
Sometimes in real estate you can get close. Sometimes there's something that's a good investment, and you can just smell it. You just know. But so then I decided to go back to grad school, and do I want an MPA, Public Administration, or MBA? And MBAs were getting, you were hearing more about them back then. This was in the mid-'80s. And so I got an MBA at Ohio State, and I spent a couple years as an analyst. And then I heard about a position open at the state pension fund at PERS.
Yeah.
And I just heard about it by accident. I was with an insurance company that was based in town, which no longer exists, and I'd been promoted 3 times in 9 months. And I thought, well, this is either I'm amazing, or, which is quite possible, or this is kind of a scary place to work, because I was replacing people who had left. So I realized that there was pretty high turnover. And so while I'd gotten my master's degree at Ohio State, I'd had a fellowship in the business placement office.
Okay.
And so I called a friend there to post the job. And talking to a friend there, that I'd worked with while I was in grad school, and she said, I just got this job in, you might want to call them. And so they thought I had the fix in. So I called right away, and the guy who ended up being my boss was sure I had the fix in, because he said, I just called 15 minutes ago with that job. And he was sure I was like waiting in the wings, for something to become available there.
Right.
And it was at the Real Estate Investment Department at Ohio Public Employees Retirement System.
Okay.
Real estate was a new investment class for the fund. It had only been legal for a couple years, and so it wasn't something I could plan as an undergrad or even in grad school, because it did not exist. That job did not exist when I was in an undergrad. That job probably didn't exist until I was 25 or 26. It just wasn't legal. And the state legislature had to make it a legal investment for the pension fund. So it was just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
It was a startup backed by a $16 billion pension fund, which at the time I think was the 14th largest in the country.
Wow.
Yeah. So as startups go, though, there were things lacking, like systems, just how do we manage this? We were early. We had a lot of money to put out. We didn't have a very big team. So we had to kind of make up our rules as we went along. And luckily, we weren't alone in that. There's a group called NACREF, the National Council of Real Estate Investment Fiduciaries, which was other people kind of at my level in different organizations coming together and saying, if we think real estate is a great investment, but if we want people to take us seriously, we need to have standards. We need to be able to build an index. And to build an index, we need to make sure that we all do accounting properly. Or the same, if not properly, at least the same way.
Right.
We need to be consistent. Because at the time, people were, they would report results, but, some included depreciation.
Right.
It was kind of...
Comparing apples to oranges.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, or peaches.
Yeah.
And kind of like the Wild West. And so that was fun, being with really smart people who've gone on to do amazing things. And kind of figuring out what should the rules be. Okay. How do we do this? And what's the best way we serve the people we work for, which in my case was the pensioners and the widows and orphans of the state of Ohio. So that goes back to the social work. I wanted to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
This was a good way to make a difference. If I made enough money, if we did well, then, maybe... then it would help ensure a secure future for people like my grandmother, who was part of the system.
Right.
So that made it real for me. And when people would come in and pitch us deals, and everybody came in and pitched us deals because we were the biggest pot of money around, and I would tell them, this is my grandmother's money.
Right.
I take it very seriously. And you'd see their eyes get big and they say, okay, how do I change this pitch? How do I mention her grandma?
Right. Well, I'll pause you right there.
Okay.
A few questions to go back to your early career. You said you were promoted 3-ish times because people in front of you were turning over, leaving the company, etc. One, I'm sure it wasn't just turnover. That's probably you being humble. What other things do you think allowed you to move up quickly in that role?
Insurance, I mean, there are some moving pieces to it, but it's like basic accounting. And I think my last title was manager of management accounting.
Okay.
And so, I mean, accounting is like, if you're going to do numbers, accounting is the easiest thing to do because they have to tie.
Right.
They just have to work out. But I was always a really hard worker and a quick study.
Okay.
I really like understanding the big picture of things, but I'm also, as I said, I like to solve puzzles and I like details, and I have the kind of mind that I'm struggling with words, and I was going to say, and I remember things really well, except for what I'm trying to say. But it was so social skills. I was developing my social skills, which I really didn't have a ton of. I went to school before Title IX.
Okay.
So I didn't play on any teams, which was a good thing. When we did stuff like volleyball or whatever, I was always chosen last. But I was a real bookworm.
Okay.
So I spent a ton of time reading and working with numbers and that kind of thing. And that's all really, really important. I love when I see my granddaughter reading at night, but I also love that I see how good she is. She's 7. So she's not in the job market yet. But I love watching her interact with her friends and her teachers and, other adults, and because that's key. That's I don't think people give enough credit to, being able to relate to somebody else one-on-one.
Right.
And I think that was something that differentiated me, because I could do the number part and all of that. That part was easy, but being able to sit down with somebody and have a professional conversation about good news or bad news or strategy or whatever, and really connect with them is more rare than you would think.
Okay. And my next question is about your transition to OPERS. You mentioned it was kind of this startup-ish phase. It was something new. It was something bold. In this time period, we have a lot of technologies thrown in the real estate industry. I'm sure people are trying to figure out how ChatGPT can underwrite properties for them. What would you say to people who are considering making that jump into a field in real estate that is somewhat unknown currently?
I love it. Well, as you said, I like helping young things grow. I love startups. Also, one thing that I think helped me get the job at OPERS, there were a couple things. One, I knew nothing about real estate, and they liked that because although I'd been working for a few years and I had a good work ethic, I really didn't know about real estate, and they wanted to train me the way they viewed it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a fiduciary organization, I think that's really important. The other thing that was in my favor was, remember, I had just been promoted, and so I had a job, I had a raise. I actually took a pay cut to go to OPERS because it was interesting. But I'm sitting in there listening to them thinking, well, I don't really need this job. I have a job. So the best time to find a job is when you have one,
Okay.
and you're feeling confident about that. But I think life moves fast, and someone is always coming up with something new, and that has always been true, at least since the Industrial Revolution, right? Or maybe since the Renaissance. Someone's always coming up with something new, and you're not going to, it's not necessarily intuitive. So be kind to yourself and give yourself time to learn. But, when I see an open door, I have to go through it.
Yeah.
Sometimes open windows. I just think it's a gift. And life is a banquet. You know, there's so much out there, so many different things to do, and so many places to go and things to see, and so many different ways that you can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen it in you, Casey. I mean, I've known you, 5-6 years now?
Probably.
And think how many different things you've done just since I met you. You know, and I love that about you. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me try that too.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I have an extra 3 hours a week, so let's do a podcast.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's because you never know what's going to be your passion if you don't try it.
Right.
And also, I'm not the same person I was in the mid-'80s, and you're not the same person you were 5, 6, 10 years
Right.
ago.
Thankfully.
Right? Yeah. Same here. So you don't. First of all, I get bored with stuff.
Yeah.
But also, you don't know what's around the corner. It could be something amazing, and
Right.
why not try it? And maybe that's Chat
GPT or
GPT or you know all this AI stuff. I'm not too worried about that
Yeah.
because real estate really is such a local business and such a, you know, even if you, I mean, I think before you buy anything, you need to go walk the neighborhood.
right.
You know, and talk to people, and you need to walk the building and all this. And even if you do a virtual tour, it's not the same.
Right.
You know, if you're buying a house, you'd go see the house,
Right.
right? Because it may look great, but you walk in and it might smell like cat pee.
So on to the next part of your career. You spent 16 years at Opers.
I did.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about how life is a banquet. What kept you at Opers for 16 years, knowing that I'm sure there were opportunities for you? And then going off of that, some people in the audience may be in their job for a year or 2 years, and recruiters may be coming up to them. Do you have any opinions on when the right time to leave a company is? But we'll start with the 16 years at Opers being the banquet for you.
Yeah, so 16 years at Opers, it was awesome. When I started, we had a couple $100 million in real estate investments. We kept track of the money that came and went. Accounting, I know, took good track of it, kept good records, but in the real estate investment area, we had a 3-ring binder. It was white, and we had yellow sheets torn off of a legal pad, and that's where we tracked the money that came and went. And when I came in, I said, maybe there's a better way, you know. But, you know, even PCs weren't that common.
Right.
It was hard to get stuff. So I said, let's do audits. Let's do appraisals.
More problems for you to solve.
Yeah. But also, okay, if we want to be institutional, we need to think institutional, and we have a responsibility to my grandma.
Right.
You know, and if I screwed up, my grandmother was going to come live with me, and she didn't want that. I didn't want that, you know. So,
Right.
So when I came in, that's what we had, and we kind of got things in order. And we were the first fund to do many, many things, just because our CIO was very opportunistic, and when he saw an opportunity, he liked to get there first. You know, you want to go where the puck is going,
Right.
not where it is. And so we were the first fund we might have been the first fund to do apartments. If not, it was us or CalPERS, like really close, in separate accounts, right? So we invested directly in the assets, or you know, through legal instruments. But we did this directly. We'd hire a manager to find something for us. So we did multifamily. There was a time when, you know, it was anything with a bed in it was not considered institutional quality. And
Wow.
so
Tides have turned.
so that means opportunity.
Right.
Right? So if nobody else is buying, you know, you should be. There, you can make money at it. My job was just to make money. We were the first for sure to do hotels. We went into REITs in a very big way in the early 90s when the REIT market, you know, the modern REIT market evolved. We were the first that I know of to do entity-level investments, so making an investment in the entity itself as opposed to the actual real estate,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the operating company.
Right.
You know, it goes on and on. It was just tons of fun. We had we built the largest private portfolio of outlet malls in the country.
Okay.
And then we were looking at taking it public, and we ended up instead selling to a public company and selling the management company that we controlled to a public company. And by the time I left, we had nearly $6 billion invested in real estate, which today I think probably OPERS has at least twice that. I left 18 years ago. I left in 2005. So we built something really cool.
Right.
And we had an amazing team. I mean, my team was just great. They were really sharp, and they liked opportunity. So that was OPERS. That's really condensed. There was more to it than that, I promise
16 years. Yep.
16 years. Moving on.
So going back to you deciding to leave OPERS, I'm sure that was a difficult decision for somebody in the current working environment that are new to the industry. They don't know how to leave companies. They don't know when the right time is. I'm sure they're getting recruited, but they don't know how to handle it. What was the tipping point for you to say, I'm confident in the next step, which brought you to the academic world?
Well, actually, there was a big gap between OPERS and the academic world. So I left OPERS in 2005, and I joined OSU in 2016.
Okay.
So I knocked on their door, but they didn't want me.
Gotcha.
But so
and during that time, you were working on your own consulting, or what were you doing?
Yeah. So two things. The reason I left was I'd been I'd had opportunities, but I had kids here in school, and I had family here in Columbus, and my mom wasn't well, and I didn't want to leave. But and I wasn't ready to move to New York or California or somewhere like that. But bigger than that, it's there's a little voice that tells you when it's time to do things, or at least there is for me. And the mistake that I've made is ignoring that little voice. Sometimes it tells me not to do something, and I do it anyhow. Or sometimes it says, okay, time to move on, or, what about this? And the thing is, that little voice will never shut up. Okay. That little voice, it will get louder and louder and louder until you have no option but to listen to it. And if you don't pay attention, I find I do stupid things like, I don't know, take the mirror off of my car or something like that, accidentally, stuff like that. So one of the lessons I'm trying to learn still is to listen to that voice earlier on. And so that was happening at OPERS, because I'd been through 3 or 4 cycles, I think 4 CIOs. I think I'd learned everything I wanted to. And I knew that there was more out there that I wanted to do. But I wasn't quite sure how to approach it. And I got calls from headhunters, mainly about serving on REIT boards because of my REIT experience. But we owned REITs. So I really couldn't sit on boards because it'd be a conflict, right?
Right.
And so finally, one of the headhunters said, okay, we're both going to be at the PREA conference next week. Let's sit down and talk. And I can still picture him. In my mind, he was smoking a cigar. Probably he wasn't. It was like inside the Waldorf or something. But he said, just explain this to me. You could work less and make more. Why don't you want to do this? And I said, well, if you put it like that, you really don't have a good reason. But I could not pursue anything. I felt I couldn't pursue anything while I was at OPERS, because anybody I wanted to work with, including a public company, would... they always wanted money from me. They always wanted, everybody was coming to me for money. So I didn't know how to look for a job.
Gotcha.
So I found a postcard that said, "Leap and the net will appear." And I put it on my fridge. And then I left. And I just, I had a couple people I'd been talking to, but nothing was certain. And I said, I can't commit to anything. And so then I just quit. I gave a month's notice. And after a week, they said, you could just go home. So I did that, and then I joined about a month later, I joined my first public company board, and then a few months later, I joined another one, and so I've served on. Currently, I'm on 2 public boards for REITs, publicly traded REITs. I've been on a bunch of public and private boards, and I really like it. I like the strategic part. So that part's a better fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
But in answer to your question that you asked 10 minutes ago, people know.
Okay.
You know when it's time to leave, right? You just may not admit it.
Yes.
I mean, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it feels okay. You're giving up security, or you're giving up the known for the unknown. Always.
Right.
Right. And the first year in any new job is the worst always, because you're figuring out everything: corporate culture, and how does this job work, and who are the players, and everything. I mean, not just far beyond how do I do this job. It's all the other stuff. In one company I worked with, this was the insurance company, the president would come by at 7 o'clock at night just to see who's still at their desk. So that should have been a red flag for me, because I don't want to be that person usually.
Right.
But you get points for being there. I think that's an American thing. I don't think that happens as much in Europe, actually. But for me, in the end, that was a cultural thing that didn't fit. Right. That I should have listened to earlier. That little voice is always right.
Okay.
You got to listen.
Yeah, I'll start listening to it.
Yeah, that's, I'm going to write a book about, red flags I should have paid attention to, and, what that little voice was trying to tell me.
Yeah, I have a rule, and it can be anything between something I'm thinking about buying, but I'll set a time period for myself. For bigger things, it might be a year. For smaller things, it might be a month. But if I'm still thinking about purchasing this 3 months from now, then I'm going to commit to it, because that thought's not going to go away. And
exactly.
And that was the start of this podcast was, okay, I've seen it done. I want to try it. I want to not regret not doing it. So I've learned through the last 6 months of me transitioning out of my finance job and into doing some of my own work is taking more leaps like that and trusting that little bird within you.
Good for you. That's awesome. It's hard to do.
It is hard to do. It's uncomfortable, but what I'm learning is it is so much more growth, not just in my career, but personally. Like, I am evolving 10 times as fast as what I was, because now I'm figuring out how I'm prioritizing my life, what's important to me, and using my connections and my strengths and my skills help me kind of paint this beautiful picture of how do I want to live my life, and that's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Oh.
Yeah, and it takes courage, but I think courage is like a muscle that you have to develop.
Right.
And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And sometimes you say, well, I've seen this movie before. I don't need to be here for the end, too. So we have a 3-day rule in my house before big purchases or like new jobs or something like that. But my husband did negotiate an exception, a carve-out for convertibles. So we don't wait. He doesn't have to wait three days to buy a convertible, but everything else we wait 3 days for.
That's good. So you're serving on boards. You're not yet in the academic world. Tell me a little bit about that transition, breaking into the academic world, and why you felt like that was your calling at that moment in time.
I think I really believe in education. And, my husband and I, we're lucky enough sometimes we can write a check to help somebody. And so one of the big ones we do every year is around education. I like mentoring. I like as you say, helping young things grow, whether they're companies or people or, plants or businesses. One of the first things I did when I left OPERS was I thought, well, it'd be fun to teach at OSU, and OSU was 7 minutes away from my house. And I know this because my husband and I would go to the basketball games, and I'd time it on the way home, 7 minutes. I thought, this is a perfect fit. And so I knocked on the door a few times, and nothing. I met with Gordon Gee. I met with Ken Gold, who was running the Center for Real Estate. I met with several people at Fisher. Nothing. They just said, we don't need it, right? We don't need you. And so, okay. But I kept in touch with them. It's real estate, and I'd see friends there. And then the Center for Real Estate got a bit more active, and so I'd go to these things. And then they got in a bind. Somebody who had been teaching passed away suddenly. And they called and said, can you teach a class in the fall? And I said, okay, sure. And then before I knew it, it went to 2 classes, and then I think I taught 5 classes that first year.
Wow.
And and it was a ton of fun. And there's something about being on campus around, people who are at the beginning of their careers that just gives you so much energy.
Absolutely.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, I felt it. I was there yesterday and the day before, and I had the same thought, like, there's so much energy, so much innovation, so much drive to change the world, whether it's in engineering or social work or anything. It's very energizing.
Yeah. It's a ton of fun.
Did you ever have any doubts of, maybe I'm not ready to teach a class, or maybe I'm not ready to teach 5 classes? I want to make sure we're not painting a picture that all of this was planned and all of this went the way Mary Beth thought it would.
Yeah, let me be clear. I guess I haven't been clear. I have never planned anything in my life. Never anything. The only thing I really planned was kind of the due date of my second child.
Okay.
And I kind of planned it in the middle of budgets, after budget season was over, before year end.
Yeah.
And then the company got bought out, and 1,000 of us got laid off, including me. So the only thing I planned, I didn't really need to have those dates, but he turned out great. So I guess so that worked okay. I had planned 0 in my career. And at OSU, when I came as a sophomore, it was overwhelming to me. And then when I came back as a senior lecturer, it was also overwhelming to me. And I've given speeches, and I've been a guest lecturer. I had never planned a class. And just PowerPoint, I always had help. I had somebody who could help me and do PowerPoint presentations or whatever. And here I am trying to learn. And remember, it's a shortened time frame because, they were in a bind. So I had to learn Carmen, Canvas. I had to learn PowerPoint. I had to learn all of this stuff. And OSU has not gotten more user-friendly through the years. So Anthony Palma, who was in Bernadette Minton's office. Bernadette was the chair of finance. He was super helpful, but a lot of it I just had to kind of figure out for myself, like, do I need an ID? I guess I did. Turned out I did. And teaching, I was, on the plus side, I have a lot of friends who are really smart and helpful. And so I reached out to them and I said, I'm teaching a class. What do you think I should, intro to real estate for starters? What should it be? And they gave me their ideas, and sometimes they sent books. And so I was calling people all over the country. And I also met with Brad Sturm and Steve Stuckwish, who I had worked with at OPERS, and they were still there. Steve is now at OSU.
Right.
And they were really helpful. I said, well, let's, think about this. So I put something together, and then I'm like, okay, how do I turn this into a class? And my son was teaching at the time. He's now at Northwestern. He was at LSU at the time.
Is he teaching math?
No, no. I have 2 kids. One's a musician. Both have PhDs that they got abroad. By the way, I highly recommend you study abroad.
Okay.
I mean, it's not too late, Casey. But
I tried, but COVID was 2 years.
It is not too late, Casey. How old are you?
23. 3. Just turned. I'm whatever year it is. Born in January 2000.
Oh, so easy to remember.
Yes.
So you got tons of time.
Yes.
Really, I mean, yeah. I seriously recommend it.
Okay.
It changes your worldview of everything. So one's a physicist and one is a musician. This is the musician. He teaches
Gotcha.
music theory at and cognition at Northwestern. The other one is in Germany doing fusion. So I'm like I'm the piker in the group, you know.
Yeah, my brother's a doctor at Johns Hopkins, so
See?
I was the. Also, if you checked my GPA on my transcript, you wouldn't be happy. But
I remember you as a really good student, though. I mean, I do.
I'm a good actor.
No, but you knew what. I mean, you read and you
Yeah.
knew, like, you could discuss it.
Yeah.
And you know, real estate, unlike what the one son does, is not rocket science,
Yeah.
right? So,
Going off of that, you
can I give you the piece of advice my son gave me?
absolutely yes.
About, if you ever have to teach a class, this was the most helpful thing.
Okay.
He said it's the Marge Simpson theory of teaching.
Okay.
There was some episode of The Simpsons
Yep.
when Marge had to teach. I don't know, you probably remember. And she just said, I just have to stay one class ahead of the students.
Yeah.
And so my first year, it was like that. And I also reached out to a friend, Greg McKinnon, who is head of research for PREA, the Pension Real Estate Association. And he had taught and, you know, PhD. And he said, look, you can spend all your life trying to make it perfect. It will never be perfect. So you just have to come to terms with how bad are you willing for it to be. And I hope my classes weren't bad, but how imperfect are you willing for it to be? Because it'll never be perfect.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot of people who go for the PhDs actually get hung up on that with their dissertation, you know, or their thesis if they're doing it. It's like, well, you know, it's good, but I know I could make it better.
Right.
At some point, you just got to cut bait and move on. You know, you have to say, this is good enough. This
Yep.
accomplishes the goal.
Done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Is a
Yeah.
lesson I'm learning.
Yeah.
One thing that's come up with you being successful in the real estate as a woman is the diversity in the real estate industry. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about, to me, your diversity of thought, studying math, studying social work, having an array of experiences, having traveling. How does the diversity of learning pair well with your success? And is there a certain example where that kind of came tangible in your career?
Everything has worked together to help me
Mm-hmm.
be who I am today, right? I'm who I am because of my experiences. The thing I took from social work that was really helpful was, you know, with counseling, you learn when people are lying to you. Later on, when people were coming to me asking for, you know, $500 million to invest, that was a really helpful skill.
Okay. Any tips for us?
Again, listen to that little voice.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Just ask questions, you know, it's, and the travel, I've always loved to travel because there's so many beautiful things in this country. And I just got back from traveling. I was in California.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to take my dog on an airplane, so we drove out and we drove back.
Wow.
And it was awesome. And you meet so many cool people, and traveling with a dog is definitely the way to do it.
Okay.
But also, I traveled a bit internationally. I gave a few speeches while I was at OPERS with AFIRE, which is the Foreign Investors in Real Estate. And it's just helpful. It broadens your experience. And then, you know, the next time you meet somebody from Germany, you know, or the Netherlands, then you have something to talk about, you know. I think it helps, for me, it helped give me empathy to kind of see how the other person sees things. And in negotiation, that's a really valuable trait in any sort of partnership you're doing together or discussions about partnerships. I think it's really helpful if you connect on a personal level, because it's all about the people. And in the end, at Opers, we used to have this debate, do you want someone who can make money or someone you can trust? And I would say yes. And they would say, but maybe we're not totally sold on this person, but we know they can make money. I'm like, I like to sleep nights.
Right.
I don't want to stay up worrying about. So it just all works together. But what I love about real estate is it feeds the number side of me, because it is about, if the numbers don't work, then nothing works. But you're really betting on people as well. And, you're betting on the manager, you're betting on the tenants. You need to get to know your tenants and say it's retail or office. Are they going to be around in a year?
Right.
Are they going to want this space in a year? Are they going to outgrow, or are they going to shut down? I mean, there's so many moving pieces to it. That part's really fun. My first CIO, his name is Bob McLaughlin at Opers. He had a big picture in his office of a conductor, like conducting a symphony.
Okay.
And that's kind of how it feels, it's development. That's why I think so many people are intrigued by development, because so many moving pieces. But if you get it right, it's just gold.
Right. That's great. You are a household name on campus and probably all over Ohio in commercial real estate.
That is really kind of you.
So
Probably not true.
I want to hear your advice. You've seen a lot of this younger generation of real estate students and now real estate professionals, and they're the future generation of the real estate world. Do you have any insights on that group of people or advice for that group of people as they...
Oh my gosh, I am so glad I never had to compete with this group. I love this generation coming up and that you are part of. I mean, I think it's a generalization, smart, kind, ethical. You care about things. You care about the country. You care about the planet. You want to make things work. You care about other people and inequities. It was such a joy to teach and to work with these students, and I'm really gratified that still people keep in touch, like yourself, and we can have conversations like this. I don't know about advice. I think you guys have really outclassed my generation. You've outpaced us, thank God. You're smarter and nicer, and I think you'll be more successful too.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, I'm not worried about you, Casey. I think you got this.
Yeah, I'm excited for the future. I think it's been very impressive from a high school student only 6 years ago coming to Ohio State, seeing the amount of resources and people that were enthusiastic to help people grow. And we've talked about it, but you and I were both talking before this podcast about how you have a mission to help young things grow, whether that's a company or a person, a student, an organization. And our generation of real estate professionals certainly wouldn't be on the track that it is without people like you and people who are willing to go the extra mile to help us out. So on behalf of everyone, I will thank you, Mary Beth McCormick.
Thank you, Casey. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
And it has been fun.
Yeah.
Any other last words for the group?
Trust yourself and be kind to yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will leave it at that. Everybody, thank you. Thank you, Mary Beth McCormick. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Learned a lot, and it was nice to flip the roles. You're usually the Now you get to be interviewed, and it was fun being on the other side of the table.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and could I just say, one of the best things in my life is the relationships that came out of this, and I'm still hearing from current students and potential students. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If anyone wants to chat, I love talking about real estate.
Great. So if you want to connect with Mary Beth McCormick, you will find her on LinkedIn, and we will show that in the Apple Podcast notes and YouTube description.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary Beth.